I was staring at my phone when the text came through. It was from a number I didn't recognize, but the message made my blood run cold. Your father just tried to force his way into your office building. Security had to escort him out. He was screaming that you stole money from your dying sister. What's going on? It was from my colleague Sarah, who worked on the fifth floor. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. This wasn't just embarrassing anymore. This was my life being torn apart in public, and I had done nothing wrong except win the lottery and refuse to fund my brother-in-law's gambling debts. If you've ever felt like your family treats you like an ATM machine instead of a person, or if you've been the responsible one who gets blamed when you finally say no, hit that like button. Subscribe because this story gets wild, and drop a comment telling me if I did the right thing. Now let me take you back to where this nightmare really began. 6 months earlier, I was sitting in my tiny 400-square-foot studio apartment in downtown Seattle, reviewing spreadsheets for work. I was a senior accountant at Patterson & Associates, pulling in $75,000 a year. I had worked my way up from entry-level, putting myself through night school, while my parents spent every dime on my older sister Chloe, the golden child who got the big bedroom, the new car at 16, the fully funded private college education. Meanwhile, I paid for community college myself, working as a waitress from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. while taking classes during the day. When I asked my parents for help with just one semester of tuition, $3,000, my father said they were stretched thin helping Chloe with her sorority fees. Her sorority fees were $5,000 a semester. The lottery ticket was an impulse buy at 7-Eleven. The clerk, Mr. Kim, smiled and said, "You want try your luck?" I normally didn't gamble, but something that morning made me pull out $2. That Wednesday night, eating leftover Chinese food and watching The Office, I remembered to check the ticket. All 6 numbers matched: 4, 17, 23, 31, 42, and Megaball 9. The jackpot was $1.2 million. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't believe it was real. The next morning, I drove to the Washington State Lottery office in Olympia. A woman named Patricia helped me with the paperwork and strongly advised me to keep the win private. Family, friends, co-workers. Suddenly, everyone has an emergency. It changes relationships, sometimes permanently. I chose the lump sum. After taxes, $680,000 would hit my account in 3 days. I hired a financial advisor named Richard Chen, a calm, methodical man with 30 years in wealth management. He created a diversified portfolio and advised me to pay off my debts first. Within 2 weeks, I paid off my $48,000 in student loans and a credit card balance. I started looking at condos and found a beautiful 1-bedroom in Capitol Hill for $280,000. For the first time in my life, I was building a real future. But I made a mistake. A huge mistake, I told my family. I should have remembered Patricia's warning. I should have kept my mouth shut. But there was this part of me, this desperate, childish part, that wanted my parents to be proud of me for once. I wanted them to look at me the way they looked at Chloe, with approval and admiration. I wanted to matter. I decided to tell them at Sunday dinner. Sunday dinners at my parents' house were a tradition that had started when Chloe got married 6 years ago. Every Sunday at 5 p.m., the family gathered. Chloe and Liam, my parents, and me if I wasn't working. Sometimes Aunt Carol would show up, my mother's older sister, who lived 2 hours away in Tacoma, but seemed to have an uncanny ability to appear whenever there was family drama. I arrived that Sunday with a bottle of wine and a nervous knot in my stomach. My parents lived in a modest 3-bedroom house in the suburb of Renton. It was the house I grew up in, with the same beige carpet that had been there since the 90s, and the same floral wallpaper in the kitchen that my mother refused to remove. The house smelled like pot roast, my mother's signature dish that she made every Sunday without fail. Chloe and Liam hadn't arrived yet, which I thought was perfect timing. I could tell my parents first, just the 3 of us, and they could be happy for me without Chloe's presence complicating things. My mother, Susan, was in the kitchen pulling the roast out of the oven. She was 57 years old, with dyed blonde hair that she touched up every 3 weeks, and a perpetual look of mild disappointment on her face. My father, Mark, was in his recliner in the living room watching a Seahawks game. He was 59, balding with a beer gut and a tendency to yell at the TV during sports. I sat down at the kitchen table and watched my mother bustling around. She didn't ask how I was or what was new in my life. She just started complaining about how Chloe was always late and how Liam probably stopped to look at cars again because he was obsessed with cars he couldn't afford. I waited for a pause in her monologue, and then said as casually as I could manage, "Mom, Dad, I have some news. Something really exciting happened. I won the lottery, $1.2 million. The kitchen went quiet. My mother stopped moving the serving spoon frozen in her hand above the pot of mashed potatoes. My father turned down the TV and walked into the kitchen, his footsteps heavy on the old linoleum. They both stared at me like I had just spoken in a foreign language. Then my mother said very slowly, "You won the lottery." I nodded. "Last week, I already claimed it. After taxes, it's about $680,000. The reaction wasn't what I expected. There was no excitement, no congratulations, no pride. My mother's face went through a series of expressions I couldn't quite read, and then she smiled, but it was tight and didn't reach her eyes. "Well, that's certainly unexpected," she said in a flat voice. My father walked closer and sat down at the table across from me. "How much did you say after taxes?" he asked. I repeated the amount. He nodded slowly, and I could see his mind working, calculating, planning. "That's quite a bit of money," he said. "You'll need to be smart about it. Make sure you help out the family. We've always believed in taking care of each other." There it was, not "I'm proud of you" or "Congratulations, honey," or "This is amazing," just an immediate expectation that I would share. I should have seen it coming. I should have known that in my family my success would never just be mine. Before I could respond, the front door burst open, and Chloe's voice rang through the house. "Sorry we're late, traffic on I-5 was insane." She walked into the kitchen wearing a dress I recognized from a boutique window downtown that had a price tag of at least $300. Her hair was professionally styled, her nails were freshly manicured, and she was carrying a designer purse I knew cost more than my monthly rent. Behind her was Liam, her husband of 6 years, wearing an expensive suit and the kind of smile that car salesmen perfect. Liam was 34, 2 years older than Chloe, and from the moment I met him, something about him set off alarm bells. He was too smooth, too charming, too quick with compliments that felt hollow. He had supposedly owned some kind of import-export business, though I had never quite understood what he actually did. All I knew was that he and Chloe lived in a house they were renting for $3,000 a month, drove leased luxury vehicles, and ate at expensive restaurants 3 times a week, while my parents helped them with their bills. My mother couldn't contain herself. Before Chloe even had her coat off, Mom blurted out, "Maya won the lottery. Can you believe it? $1.2 million. I watched Chloe's face carefully. The smile froze on her lips. Her eyes widened, then narrowed, then widened again. For just a second, I saw something ugly flash across her features, something that looked like anger or jealousy or both. But it was gone so quickly, I almost thought I imagined it. Then she rushed over and hugged me, squealing, "Oh my God, Maya, that's incredible. I'm so happy for you." But her voice was too high, too forced, and her hug was stiff. When she pulled back, her smile still didn't reach her eyes. Liam's reaction was more obvious. His eyes literally lit up like someone had plugged him into an electrical socket. He came over and hugged me, which was bizarre, because we had never hugged before. We barely had a relationship. "Congratulations, kiddo," he said, calling me kiddo, even though I was only 3 years younger than him. "You're set for life now. Smart girl. Real smart." The rest of that dinner was excruciating. Every conversation somehow circled back to money. Liam started talking about investment opportunities. He had heard about some cryptocurrency thing that was supposedly going to explode. My father mentioned that their roof had been leaking, and they had been putting off repairs because it was expensive. My mother brought up how Chloe and Liam's kids were in private school and the tuition was killing them. Chloe complained about how old her car was getting and how embarrassing it was to drive a 4-year-old vehicle. I felt like a piece of meat being circled by sharks. Every time I tried to change the subject, someone would steer it back. Finally, Liam leaned back in his chair, patted his stomach, and said, "You know, Maya, with money like that, you could really help the family. We're all in this together, right? Blood is thicker than water." The phrase made my skin crawl. I mumbled something non-committal about needing to be smart with the money and left as soon as I reasonably could, claiming I had work to do. I drove home with a sick feeling in my stomach. My phone started ringing before I even made it back to my apartment. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. She called 2 more times. I turned off my phone and spent the rest of the night second-guessing my decision to tell them. But I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. They were my family. They loved me. They just needed time to adjust to the news. The calls started the very next morning. I was at work trying to focus on a quarterly report when my desk phone rang. It was my mother. Maya, honey, I was thinking about what you said yesterday, about the lottery money. Your father and I have been talking, and we really need your help with that roof. The contractor quoted us $12,000, but you know how these things are. It always ends up being more. Could you maybe contribute? Say $15,000 to be safe? I was so shocked I didn't know what to say. $15,000, just like that. Not even a week after I told her, and she was already asking for more than a year's worth of my previous savings. I stammered that I needed to think about it, that I was still working with my financial advisor on a plan. She sighed, that particular sigh she reserved for when I disappointed her. Well, I just thought you'd want to help your parents. We did raise you after all, but I understand if you're too busy with your new money to think about us. The guilt trip was immediate and effective. I found myself saying I would think about it, that I would see what I could do. When I hung up, my hands were shaking. I called Mr. Chen, and he listened patiently as I explained the situation. Maya, he said gently, this is exactly what I was worried about. The moment people know you have money, you become a target. Even family, especially family. My advice, set a boundary now. Decide what you're comfortable giving, if anything, and make it clear that's it. Otherwise, this will never end. I decided I could contribute $1,000 to the roof. It seemed reasonable, helpful, without being excessive. I called my mother back that evening and told her. There was a long pause, then another sigh. $1,000. That's all, Maya. We're talking about the roof over your parents' heads. The roof you grew up under. But fine. If that's all you can spare, I guess we'll make do. She hung up before I could respond. I felt terrible, guilty, and angry all at once. But I stuck to my decision and transferred $1,000 to their account. 2 days later, Chloe called. She was crying. Maya, I don't know what to do. Liam's business is struggling. The import tariffs are killing him, and Sophie and Jake's school tuition is due, and we're $10,000 short. I hate to ask, but could you help? Just this once, we'll pay you back. I felt trapped. This was my sister, my niece and nephew, but $10,000, that was a huge amount. I thought about what Mr. Chen had said about boundaries. I told Chloe I could give her $2,000, which was already more than I had planned to give anyone. She stopped crying immediately. $2,000, Maya, I need $10,000. Sophie and Jake are going to get kicked out of school. Do you want your niece and nephew going to public school with kids who don't even have futures? The snobbery in her voice made me angry. I had gone to public school. So had she, until my parents scrounged up money for her senior year at a private school so she could pad her college applications. Chloe, $2,000 is what I can do. I'm not made of money. She laughed bitterly. Not made of money, you just won almost $700,000, but fine. I see where your priorities are. She hung up on me. I gave her the $2,000, but I felt sick about it. The pattern continued. My father called asking for money for car repairs. $4,000 for a new transmission. I gave him $1,500. My mother called asking for money for new appliances. The refrigerator was dying. $7,000 for a new one. I gave her $1,000. Chloe called again. Sophie needed braces. $8,000. I said no. She cried and called me selfish. Each time I said no or gave less than they wanted, the pressure increased. The phone calls became more frequent, more emotional. My mother would cry. My father would yell. Chloe would alternate between sobbing and accusing me of being cold and heartless. I was working with a therapist by this point, a woman named Dr. Rashid, who specialized in family dynamics and boundaries. She kept telling me that what I was experiencing was financial abuse, that healthy families don't treat each other like ATMs. But knowing that intellectually didn't make it hurt less emotionally. Then Liam called me directly. It was a Friday evening. I was at my apartment packing boxes because I had just closed on the condo and was preparing to move. My phone rang with his number, which I found odd because Liam never called me. Hey Maya, how are you doing? Listen, I wanted to talk to you business to business. I know Chloe has been emotional, but let me lay out the facts. My company is in a rough spot. The economy, the tariffs, it's a perfect storm. But this is temporary. I have contracts that will come through in 6 months that will turn everything around. I need a bridge loan, $20,000. I'll pay you back with 10% interest in 6 months. That's a great return on investment. Something in my gut told me this was wrong. Liam had never talked specific numbers with me before. And $20,000 was a lot of money. But my father called me the next morning and pressured me. Liam is family now, Maya. He's your brother-in-law. We help family. Your sister is going through a tough time with the business struggling. You have the means to help. Are you really going to let them suffer when you're sitting on all that money? Against my better judgment, against Dr. Rashid's advice, against Mr. Chen's warnings, I transferred $15,000 to Liam. I told myself it was a loan. I made him sign a simple promissory note I found online. He signed it cheerfully and promised he'd pay me back with interest. I never saw that money again. 6 weeks went by. I moved into my new condo and tried to enjoy it, but the constant pressure from my family was draining me. My mother called weekly with new emergencies. My father stopped by my office twice, surprising me during lunch to talk about how they might lose the house if they couldn't refinance. And wouldn't it be a shame if they ended up homeless while their daughter lived in luxury? Chloe sent me long text messages about how hard her life was and how easy mine was now. I had given them a total of $18,000 in 2 months. My beautiful investment plan with Mr. Chen was being slowly chipped away. And worse, the more I gave, the more they expected. It was like feeding a monster that only grew hungrier. Dr. Rashid told me I needed to cut them off completely, but I wasn't ready. They were my family. Surely things would get better. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I had taken a half-day off work to meet with Mr. Chen for our quarterly review. We were sitting in his office looking at my portfolio on his large computer monitor. The investments were performing well. Despite the $18,000 I had given away, I still had a healthy balance, and it was growing. We were discussing long-term strategies, maybe buying a rental property in a few years, when my apartment door buzzer rang through my phone. I ignored it. Mr. Chen and I were in the middle of an important conversation about tax-advantaged accounts. The buzzer rang again. Then my phone started ringing. It was Chloe. I silenced it. She called again immediately, then again. Mr. Chen noticed my distraction and said kindly, "Do you need to get that? We can pause." I shook my head and apologized, putting my phone on Do Not Disturb. We continued the meeting for another 30 minutes. When we finished and I stood to leave, Mr. Chen said something that stuck with me. "Maya, your financial future is secure if you protect it, but money has a way of revealing people's true nature. Be careful who you trust." I left his office and headed back to my condo. When I walked into the lobby, the concierge, a friendly older man named Marcus, looked uncomfortable. "Ms. Alvarez, there's been someone trying to get up to your unit. A woman. She's been in the lobby for about 45 minutes. I told her she needed to call you first, but she's refusing to leave. She's over there." He gestured to the waiting area near the elevator. It was Chloe. She looked terrible. Her mascara was running down her face. Her hair was a mess, and she was wearing sweatpants and an old t-shirt, which was shocking because Chloe never left the house without being fully made up. The moment she saw me, she rushed over. "Maya, oh thank God. I've been calling you for an hour. We need to talk. It's an emergency." I apologized to Marcus and told him it was okay that she was my sister. We went up to my condo. The moment we got inside, before I could even offer her water or ask her to sit, Chloe started sobbing. "It's Liam, his company. Maya, it went bankrupt. We're going to lose everything. The house, the cars, everything. We have over 100,000 in debt. I don't know what to do. I'm terrified. The kids, Maya. What am I going to tell Sophie and Jake?" I stood there frozen, trying to process what she was saying. Part of me felt genuinely bad for her. She looked devastated. But another part of me, a cynical part that had been growing louder over the past months, wondered if this was another manipulation. I helped her to the couch and got her some tissues. I let her cry for a few minutes while I made tea, trying to figure out what to say. When I came back with 2 mugs, she had calmed down slightly. "Tell me exactly what happened," I said. She took a shaky breath. "Liam's been under so much stress. The business has been failing for months. He tried everything, but he couldn't save it. He had to declare bankruptcy last week. And now we found out he had taken out personal loans to try to keep the business afloat. We owe so much money, Maya. I'm so scared." I felt terrible for her. Despite everything, despite the pressure and the guilt trips, she was my sister, and she was clearly in crisis. "What do you need?" I asked. Chloe looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. "I need help. We need help. Maya, I know I've asked for a lot already, but this is different. This is our lives falling apart." She grabbed my hand. "I need you to help us pay off the debt, at least some of it. Maybe if we could pay off 50,000, we could negotiate with the other creditors. I wouldn't ask if we had any other choice." $50,000. My mind reeled. That was a huge amount of money. But this was a real crisis, not just another request for school tuition or car repairs. This was bankruptcy and debt collectors. I was about to say something about to tell her I needed to think about it and talk to my financial advisor when her eyes wandered to my TV. Mr. Chen had sent me a follow-up email with an attachment of my portfolio summary, and I had been looking at it on my laptop before he arrived that afternoon. The laptop was still open on my coffee table connected to my TV screen via HDMI, because I liked looking at documents on a bigger screen. The portfolio summary was displayed in large font on the 55-inch TV. The total balance was clearly visible. I watched Chloe's face change in real time. The tears stopped. Her expression shifted from grief to shock to something harder and colder. She pulled her hand away from mine and stood up. $642,000, she said slowly, reading the number off the screen. You have $642,000. You spent all that time crying poor when I asked for $10,000 for the kids' school. You gave Liam only $15,000 when he needed $20,000, and you're sitting on over $600,000. The accusation in her voice made my blood run cold. Chloe, that's my savings. That's my retirement. That's my future. She laughed, and it was a bitter, ugly sound. Your future? What about our future? What about your niece and nephew's future? We're family, Maya. You're supposed to help family, but you're just hoarding all that money like some kind of dragon sitting on gold. I stood up too, anger rising in my chest. I won that money. I worked my entire life while you got everything handed to you. I'm not obligated to bankrupt myself because Liam made bad business decisions. Her face twisted with rage. Bankrupt yourself, you'd still have over $500,000. We need $50,000 to save our lives, and you can't even spare that. What kind of person are you? I was shaking now from anger and hurt and disbelief. The kind of person who has to protect herself because clearly no one else will. I've given you and Mom and Dad $18,000 in the past 2 months. How much is enough, Chloe? When do I get to stop being the family ATM? She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. You know what I was wrong about you. I always thought you were just boring and responsible. But you're not. You're selfish. You're cold. And when we lose everything, when Sophie and Jake are crying because they have to move to some terrible apartment in a bad neighborhood, I want you to remember that you could have helped and you chose not to. She slammed the door so hard that a picture frame fell off my wall and the glass shattered. I stood there in my living room staring at the broken frame, my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to run after her, to fix things, to make her happy. But a bigger part of me was just angry. Angry that my win had turned into this nightmare. Angry that I couldn't even enjoy my success without feeling guilty. Angry that no matter what I did, it would never be enough. I called Dr. Rashid and got an emergency appointment for the next day. She listened to everything and then said something that hit me like a truck. Maya, what Chloe is doing is emotional blackmail. She's using your love for your niece and nephew to manipulate you, and your parents are enabling it. This isn't about money, this is about control and entitlement. Until you set a firm boundary and stick to it, this will never end. I knew she was right, but knowing it and doing it were two different things. 2 days later, I got a text from my mother. Family dinner Sunday, 6 p.m., don't be late. We need to discuss Chloe's situation. It wasn't a request. It was a command. Every fiber of my being told me not to go to ignore the text to set the boundary Dr. Rashid kept talking about. But that old desperate need to be accepted by my family overrode my common sense. I texted back a simple, okay. That Sunday dinner changed everything. I arrived at my parents' house at exactly 6 p.m., holding a bottle of wine I had bought at the store like I always did. Like this was a normal family dinner, but the moment I walked in, I knew it wasn't. The atmosphere was wrong, too quiet, too tense. My mother barely greeted me, just gestured toward the dining room with a tight smile. I walked in and froze. It wasn't just my immediate family. Aunt Carol was there, sitting at the table with her arms crossed and a smug expression on her face. Aunt Carol was my mother's older sister, a woman who had spent my entire childhood comparing me unfavorably to her own perfect daughters. She lived in Tacoma and rarely made the 2-hour drive unless there was gossip or drama. Her presence meant this was serious. The dining room table was set formally, which was unusual. My father sat at the head like he was presiding over a board meeting. My mother sat to his right, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, even though we hadn't started talking yet. Chloe sat across from Aunt Carol, her face carefully composed in an expression of tragic dignity. Liam was notably absent. I sat down in the only empty chair and put the wine bottle on the table. Nobody thanked me for it. My father cleared his throat. Maya, thank you for coming. We need to have a serious family discussion about what's been happening. I nodded, my heart sinking. Chloe has shared with us the situation with Liam's business, the bankruptcy, the debt. And she also shared what happened when she came to you for help. She told you I refused to give her $50,000, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. My father nodded. She told us, and frankly, Maya, I'm shocked. Chloe is your sister, she's drowning, and you're sitting on a fortune doing nothing. I felt the familiar guilt rising, but pushed it down. Dad, I've already given the family $18,000 in 2 months. I have my own financial plans and responsibilities. Aunt Carol cut in, her voice dripping with judgment. 18,000 out of over 600,000, that's barely 3%. In my day, family meant something. You helped each other, you didn't hoard money while your own flesh and blood suffered. Honestly, Susan, I'm ashamed you raised such a selfish child. The words stung like a slap. My mother made a small sound of distress but didn't defend me. My father continued as if Aunt Carol hadn't spoken. Here's what's going to happen. Your mother and I have discussed this with Chloe and we've come to a decision. You're going to give Chloe $500,000. The room spun. I was sure I had misheard. What? My father repeated it slower, like I was stupid. $500,000, $250,000 to pay off Liam's debts so he can get back on his feet. $250,000 for them to start over. Put a down payment on a house. Get stable. That's what family does. I stood up so fast my chair fell backwards. Are you insane? That's almost everything I have. I'm not giving Chloe $500,000. My mother started crying harder. How can you be so cruel? Your sister is suffering. We raised you better than this. I looked at Chloe, who was watching me with cold, calculating eyes. This had been planned. This whole dinner, this ambush had been carefully orchestrated. They had brought in Aunt Carol as reinforcement. They had worked out the exact number. They expected me to cave. No, I said firmly. The answer is no. This is my money. I won it. I've been financially responsible my whole life, while Chloe got everything handed to her and Liam made whatever bad business decisions led to this bankruptcy. I'm not fixing it. My father's face turned dark red. He stood up, towering over me. You ungrateful little brat, after everything we've done for you. We put a roof over your head. We fed you. We clothed you. And this is how you repay us. I felt 20 years of resentment explode inside me. You did the bare minimum required by law. You fed me and clothed me and gave me shelter. Congratulations on meeting the basic requirements of being a parent. Meanwhile, you paid for Chloe's private school and her sorority and her fancy college while I worked 2 jobs and put myself through community college. You bought her a car for her birthday while I took the bus. You've treated me like an afterthought my entire life, and now you think I owe you. I don't owe you anything. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother looked like I had physically struck her. Aunt Carol's mouth was hanging open. Chloe's face was twisted with rage. My father took a step toward me, and for a moment I thought he might actually hit me. Instead, he grabbed my arm hard, his fingers digging into my skin. You sit back down right now, young lady. We are not done here. His grip was painful, almost painful enough to bruise. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back up at his face. Something inside me snapped. Let go of me, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Don't you ever put your hands on me again. I yanked my arm free with more force than I intended, and he stumbled slightly. I grabbed my purse and walked toward the door. Behind me, chaos erupted. My mother was wailing. Aunt Carol was shouting something about respect. Chloe was yelling that I was destroying the family. My father was bellowing for me to come back. I walked out the door, got in my car, and drove away. My entire body was shaking. I drove aimlessly for an hour, tears streaming down my face, my mind reeling. When I finally calmed down enough to think clearly, I drove to Jenna's apartment. Jenna had been my best friend since college. We had met in an accounting class and bonded over our shared love of terrible reality TV and our shared experience of difficult families. She had become a lawyer specializing in family law, and she was one of the few people I trusted completely. I knocked on her door at almost 10 p.m. She answered in pajamas, her hair in a messy bun, and took one look at my face before pulling me inside. I told her everything. The lottery win, the constant demands, tonight's dinner, all of it. She listened without interrupting, getting angrier and angrier on my behalf. When I finished, she said, "Maya, what they're doing is financial abuse. It's emotional abuse. And I'm pretty sure your father grabbing you like that could qualify as assault. You need to protect yourself." We stayed up until 2 a.m. making a plan. First thing Monday morning, I would change my phone number. Not just block my family, but get an entirely new number that they didn't have. I would give it only to people I absolutely trusted. Second, I would delete all my social media accounts. No Facebook, no Instagram, no Twitter. I couldn't stand the thought of my family weaponizing social media against me. Third, I would look for a new place to live. They knew where my condo was. I didn't feel safe there anymore. Jenna also suggested I document everything, save every text message, every email, every voicemail. If my family tried to escalate things legally, which she thought was unlikely but possible, I would need evidence. She also recommended I send a cease and desist letter, which she offered to write for me, a formal legal document telling them to stop contacting me or face legal action. I left Jenna's apartment feeling more in control than I had in months. Monday morning, I went to the phone store and got a new number. I texted it only to Jenna, Mr. Chen, Dr. Rashid, my boss, and 2 other close friends. The sense of relief was immediate. My old phone, which I kept turned off in a drawer, showed 73 missed calls by Tuesday afternoon. I didn't listen to a single voicemail. I deactivated all my social media accounts. Later, I would learn this was a critical decision, but at the time, I just wanted to feel less exposed. I started apartment hunting for a place with serious security. I found a high-rise condo building in downtown Seattle with 24/7 security keycard, access to the elevators, and a concierge who actually took his job seriously. The rent was more than I wanted to pay, but I needed peace of mind. I signed a year lease and started packing. For 1 week, I had peace. Glorious, quiet peace. No phone calls, no guilt trips, no demands. I moved into my new apartment, which was on the 23rd floor, with a stunning view of the city and Elliott Bay. I unpacked slowly, deliberately, creating a space that felt safe. I went to work, did my job, came home, and actually relaxed for the first time in months. I started to believe maybe it was over. I was so naive. On Thursday afternoon, I was in a meeting with my team, presenting the quarterly financial analysis, when my assistant Sarah knocked on the conference room door. She looked uncomfortable. "Maya, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation in the lobby. Security is asking if you can come down." My stomach dropped. I excused myself and took the elevator down. Through the glass doors of our building's lobby, I could see my father and Chloe arguing with the security guard, a professional woman named Monica, who I had always liked. My father was red-faced and gesturing wildly. Chloe was crying, but it looked performative, theatrical. Other people in the lobby were watching. I recognized some of my coworkers. This was a disaster. I didn't go outside. I pulled out my phone and called Monica's desk line from inside the building. "Monica, it's Maya Alvarez. Those are members of my family. I do not wish to speak with them. Please have them removed from the property and banned from returning." I could see Monica nod and speak into her phone. Within minutes, 2 more security guards appeared. My father started yelling louder, something about his daughter Trinity Alvarez and family obligations. Several people pulled out their phones and started recording. I watched from inside as security firmly escorted them off the property. My father was yelling the whole way. Chloe was sobbing dramatically, and I felt nothing but cold fury. They had come to my workplace. They had made a scene in front of my colleagues. They had tried to humiliate me into compliance. I rode the elevator back up to my floor, my hands shaking. When I got back to my office, there was a message to call Mr. Peterson, my boss. My heart sank. I went to his office, knocked, and entered when he called me in. Mr. Peterson was 55, a calm man with gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He had always been fair with me, and I respected him. He gestured for me to sit. "Maya, I want you to know that we value you as an employee. Your work has always been exemplary. You're one of the best accountants we have." I waited for the but. It came. "But we can't have family disputes disrupting our workplace. What happened in the lobby today was uncomfortable for everyone involved. I need your assurance that it won't happen again." I felt humiliated and angry. "Sir, I apologize. Those family members showed up without my knowledge or permission. I've actually already instructed security to ban them from the building. I promise it won't happen again." He nodded slowly. "See that it doesn't. I'd hate to lose you over personal issues. I left his office feeling like I had been punched in the stomach. My family wasn't just attacking me emotionally anymore. They were attacking my career, my livelihood, my professional reputation. I sat in my office and tried to focus on work, but my mind was racing. That evening, I met with Jenna at a quiet restaurant. I told her what happened. She was furious. "This is harassment, Maya. You need to fight back." "Fight back how?" I asked. "They're my family. If I go to the police, it'll just make everything worse." Jenna leaned forward. "They're controlling the narrative right now. Think about it. They're probably telling everyone they know that you're this horrible person who won't help your struggling sister. Everyone only hears their side. You need to tell your side, publicly." I shook my head. "I don't want to air my family's dirty laundry." Jenna grabbed my hand. "Maya, they're not giving you a choice. They've already made this public by showing up at your work. If you stay silent, they win. They'll keep escalating until you cave. You need to protect yourself." I thought about it for days. The idea of exposing my family publicly made me feel sick. But Jenna was right. The harassment was only getting worse. Friday afternoon, my old phone buzzed. I had been checking it once a day just to see if there was anything important. There was a notification from Facebook, an app I had deactivated, but apparently hadn't fully deleted. Someone had tagged me in a post. Curiosity got the better of me. I logged in. What I saw made my blood freeze. Chloe had written a long post on her Facebook page. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. She talked about how her husband's business had failed due to circumstances beyond their control, how they were facing bankruptcy, how her children might have to leave their school. She talked about how devastating it was to be in this position. And then she revealed that her younger sister had won over $1.2 million in the lottery, but had refused to help the family. She didn't name me directly, but anyone who knew our family would know exactly who she meant. Attached to the post was a GoFundMe page asking for donations to help save her family from financial ruin. The post had been up for 6 hours and had been shared 847 times. The comments were brutal. Hundreds of people, most of whom I had never met, were calling me greedy, heartless, a terrible sister. Distant cousins I barely knew were chiming in about family values and loyalty. Some of my old high school classmates were writing about how I had always been cold and unfriendly. Aunt Carol had shared it with a comment, "Praying for you, Chloe. Some people forget what family means." The narrative was set. I was the villain. My phone started ringing on the old number. I made the mistake of listening to one voicemail. It was from my cousin Mike, who I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. "Maya, what the hell is wrong with you? Your sister is drowning and you're sitting on $1 million. That's disgusting. Call me back." I deleted it without listening to the other 62 voicemails. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I called Jenna. "They posted about it on Facebook. It's everywhere." She told me to screenshot everything and send it to her. "This is actually good," she said. "It gives us ammunition." "Ammunition for what?" I asked. "Maya, we're going to expose them. All of them. I'm going to hire a private investigator. We're going to find out the truth about Liam's so-called business failure. And then you're going to tell your story, the real story, with evidence. Are you ready to do that?" I thought about Mr. Peterson's disappointed face. I thought about the comments calling me heartless. I thought about my father grabbing my arm. I thought about Chloe's calculating eyes when she saw my portfolio balance. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready. Let's do it." The next week was a blur. Jenna connected me with a private investigator named Marcus through her firm. Marcus was in his 40s, ex-military, all business. I paid him his retainer and gave him all the information I had about Liam. Within 5 days, he came back with a report that was even worse than I imagined. Liam had never had a legitimate business. The import-export company he claimed to run had been registered as an LLC, but there was no evidence it had ever conducted any real business. No inventory, no clients, no revenue. What Liam did have was a gambling problem, a serious one. Marcus provided documentation, bank statements showing cash withdrawals at casinos, totaling over $300,000 over the past 18 months. Records from multiple casinos showing he was a regular at high-stakes poker tables. Testimonies from people who knew about his gambling, obtained through what Marcus called discreet inquiries. And most damning evidence that Liam owed money to a loan shark named Vince Markelli, who operated in the Seattle area and had connections to organized crime. Marcus showed me surveillance photos of Liam meeting with Vince. He showed me records of threatening text messages Vince had sent to Liam. The business bankruptcy story was a complete fabrication. Liam hadn't lost a company because there had never been a real company. He had gambled away hundreds of thousands of dollars, including my $15,000 loan, and was now in debt to dangerous people. My parents had to have known some of this. The fact that they had demanded I give him $250,000 meant they were either willfully ignorant or actively complicit in trying to use my money to pay off organized crime. I was furious. I was hurt. I was betrayed on a level I didn't even know was possible. They wanted me to throw away half my lottery winnings, not to help Chloe start over or to help my niece and nephew, but to pay off illegal gambling debts. I spent 2 days going back and forth about what to do. Part of me wanted to just walk away to cut them off completely and never look back. But another part of me wanted justice. I wanted people to know the truth. I wanted the hundreds of people calling me heartless on Facebook to know what kind of people they were actually defending. With Jenna's help, made a video. We did it professionally. Jenna's office had a small conference room with good lighting and a clean backdrop. I dressed in business attire, did my makeup and hair, and wrote out notes on what I wanted to say. I must have done 15 takes before I got one I was happy with. In the final version, I spoke for 17 minutes. I sat at a table, looked directly at the camera, and told the truth. I started by confirming that yes, I had won the lottery. I showed my official letter from the Washington State Lottery Commission with the amount won and the amount received after taxes. I explained that I had been responsible with the money paying off debts, investing wisely, and securing my future. Then I talked about how my family's requests had started small but rapidly escalated. I showed screenshots of text messages demanding money, totaling them up on screen. $18,000 in 2 months. I showed my father's angry voicemail messages. I showed a photo of the bruise on my arm from where he grabbed me at that dinner, a bruise I had photographed at Jenna's insistence. Then I dropped the bombshell. I explained that I had hired a private investigator to look into Liam's business failure. I showed sections of the report with personal information redacted, but the key facts clearly visible. No legitimate business, $300,000 in gambling losses, debts to a loan shark with organized crime connections. I addressed the GoFundMe directly. This campaign is based on false information. My sister's husband doesn't need help recovering from a failed business. He needs help with a severe gambling addiction, and my family wants me to pay off his debts to dangerous criminals. I talked about my father and Chloe showing up at my workplace, getting security called on them, and almost costing me my job. I talked about the cease and desist letter Jenna had sent that they had ignored. I talked about the years of being the responsible child, the overlooked daughter, the afterthought. I talked about how the moment I had something of my own, something I had earned through pure luck, my family had tried to take it away. And I ended with my decision. I will not be giving my family $500,000 or any other amount to pay off gambling debts. However, because I believe in actually helping people rather than enabling destructive behavior, I am making a donation of $50,000 to the Washington Council on problem gambling in Liam's name. I hope they can use this money to help people struggling with addiction, and I hope that anyone watching this who has ever felt pressured, manipulated, or financially abused by their family knows that you are not wrong to protect yourself. You are not selfish for having boundaries. You are allowed to say no. Jenna helped me post the video to YouTube. We titled it, "The Truth About My Lottery Win Responding to Financial Abuse." We shared the link to a few local community Facebook groups, and then we waited. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 6 hours, the video had been viewed 50,000 times. Within 24 hours, it was over 1 million. Within 48 hours, it was viral. News outlets started picking it up. Local Seattle TV stations asked to interview me. National news websites wrote articles about it. The comment section was filled with support, with people sharing their own stories of family members trying to exploit them financially, with people apologizing for judging me based on Chloe's initial post. The tide of public opinion turned completely. Suddenly, I wasn't the villain anymore. I was a survivor. I was brave. I was standing up to abuse. Chloe's GoFundMe page was reported by thousands of users and was frozen by the platform pending an investigation into fraudulent claims. Facebook took down her original post after mass reporting for false information. My family's phone numbers were somehow leaked online, and they were flooded with angry calls and messages. Aunt Carol deleted all her social media accounts after being called out by dozens of mutual friends and relatives who were horrified by her role in the ambush. The narrative had flipped entirely, and now my family were the ones being judged. But the real consequences were just beginning. 2 days after the video went viral, Jenna got a call from a Seattle police detective. Vince Marcelli, the loan shark, had been arrested on unrelated charges, and during the investigation, they had found evidence connecting him to Liam. The detective wanted to interview me about what I knew. I met with him and showed him everything Marcus had found. The detective thanked me and said it would be helpful in their case. Later, I learned that Liam had been called in for questioning. When confronted with the evidence, Liam had apparently panicked and tried to flee the state. He made it as far as Portland before being picked up. Meanwhile, Vince's arrest had solved one problem, but created another. With Vince in custody, his associates were scrambling to collect debts he was owed. And now that the video had made it clear they weren't getting any money through me, they turned their attention to the people who had been vouching for Liam all along. My parents. 3 men showed up at my parents' house on a Tuesday evening. My mother called me in hysterics from her new number, which I had blocked but she had called from. The call went to voicemail. She left a crying message saying that loan sharks had threatened them, that they needed money immediately, that they might lose the house. Part of me felt vindicated. Part of me felt guilty. But mostly I just felt tired. I didn't call her back. Over the next few weeks, I learned through the grapevine what was happening to my family. My parents had been forced to take out a home equity loan for $100,000 to make partial payments to Vince's associates through an intermediary. They had mortgaged their future, their retirement, their security. My father had aged 10 years. My mother was on anxiety medication. Chloe had filed for divorce. Whether it was genuine shock at discovering the extent of Liam's gambling or just a strategic move to distance herself from his criminal problems, I didn't know. The divorce was nasty. Liam had disappeared again after his questioning, and there were rumors he had gone to California or maybe Nevada. Chloe was left alone with Sophie and Jake, ages 10 and 8, trying to figure out how to be a single mother for the first time in her life. She got a job as a receptionist at a dental office, making $38,000 a year. She moved out of the expensive rental house into a small 2-bedroom apartment. For the first time in her adult life, she had to budget, had to plan meals, had to worry about bills. I threw myself into my life. Work became my sanctuary. I was promoted to senior accounting manager 6 months after the video went viral, with a significant raise and a team of 4 people reporting to me. My boss told me he was impressed with how I had handled a difficult personal situation with professionalism. I made new friends in my building, joined a book club that met every other Thursday, started taking yoga classes at a studio near my apartment. I dated a little, nothing serious, but it felt good to put myself out there and meet people who didn't know anything about my family drama. My investments were doing well. Mr. Chen and I met quarterly, and each time he congratulated me on staying disciplined. Despite everything, despite the money I had given away, and the costs of the private investigator and the lawyer, I still had over $600,000 invested and growing. I bought a new car, a Honda Accord, nothing flashy but reliable and comfortable. I took a vacation to Hawaii, my first real vacation in 5 years. I started living instead of just surviving. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was unfinished. For 13 months, I had no contact with my family. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits. I had blocked all their numbers. I had moved on with my life. But there was a hollow feeling in my chest that never quite went away. These were the people who raised me, who I had loved despite everything, who I had shared a lifetime of memories with. Letting go of that, completely accepting that they might never change, and we might never have a relationship again, was harder than I expected. Dr. Rashid and I spent many sessions talking about grief, about mourning the family I wished I had, rather than the family I actually had. Then one day, about 14 months after the video went viral, I got a text from an unknown number. "Maya, this is your mom. I know you don't want to hear from us, but please, can we meet just to talk? No demands, no asking for money. We just need to see you and say some things. Please." I stared at the message for a long time. My first instinct was to delete it and block the number. Jenna advised me against meeting with them. "They hurt you, they tried to destroy you. You don't owe them anything," she said. But Dr. Rashid had a different perspective. Maybe seeing them, hearing what they have to say would give you closure. You can always say no to further contact, but at least you'll know you tried. Some part of me needed closure. I needed to look them in the eye and see if anything had changed. I texted back and agreed to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop called Zeitgeist in the Pioneer Square neighborhood, somewhere none of us frequented. I arrived 15 minutes early and claimed a corner table where I could see the door. I ordered an Americano and tried to calm my racing heart. When they walked in, I barely recognized them. My father looked like he had aged 15 years instead of just over 1. His hair was completely gray now, his face heavily lined, his shoulders slumped in a way I had never seen before. My mother had lost at least 20 pounds, her face gaunt, her eyes hollow. She was wearing jeans and a cardigan instead of her usual dress and jewelry. Chloe was with them, and the change in her was even more dramatic. Gone was the perfect hair and makeup, the designer clothes, the manicured nails. She wore plain jeans and a simple sweater from Target, her hair pulled back in a basic ponytail. Minimal makeup, dark circles under her eyes. She looked tired and older, and for the first time in her life, ordinary. They approached my table slowly, like they were afraid I might bolt. We sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment. Then my mother started crying. "Maya, honey, I'm so sorry. We're all so sorry. We were terrible to you. We were greedy and blind and selfish." Her voice was shaking. "I don't know what else to say, except that we were wrong. So completely wrong." My father nodded, looking down at his hands. "We failed you, Maya. Your whole life we treated you like you were less important than Chloe, like your needs didn't matter, like you only existed to support your sister. That wasn't fair. That wasn't right. That was our failure as parents." Chloe spoke next, and her voice was different. The edge of superiority, the entitled tone, the expectation that the world would bend to her, well, all of it was gone. "I've had a lot of time to think this past year. A lot of time alone working a real job, taking care of my kids, living in a tiny apartment. I realized that Mom and Dad's favoritism didn't do me any favors. It made me weak. It made me entitled. It made me think I deserved things just because I existed. I never had to work for anything, and when things got hard, I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know how to be an adult." She looked directly at me, and I saw genuine regret in her eyes. "I envied you, Maya. For years, I envied your strength, your independence, your ability to make it on your own. And when you won the lottery instead of being happy for you, all I felt was jealousy and anger that you had something I didn't. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for the part I played in hurting you." I listened to their apologies, their expressions of regret, their explanations. Part of me wanted to believe them. Part of me wanted to forgive and move forward and have a family again. But I had learned something important over the past year. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. You can forgive someone for your own peace of mind without letting them back into your life. You can acknowledge their apology without trusting them again. And I wasn't ready to trust them. Maybe I never would be. "I appreciate you saying this," I said carefully, keeping my voice neutral. "But I need you to understand something. The damage you caused isn't something that can be fixed with an apology. You didn't just ask me for money. You demanded it. You manipulated me. You tried to destroy my reputation. Dad, you grabbed me hard enough to leave bruises. Chloe, you posted lies about me on the internet and created a fraudulent fundraising campaign. You showed up at my workplace and almost cost me my job. You tried to bully me into handing over my entire financial security to pay off illegal gambling debts to criminals. That's not just bad judgment, that's abuse." They all looked down, unable to meet my eyes. My mother was openly weeping. My father's jaw was clenched. Chloe's hands were shaking. I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope. "I've made a decision about how I want to use some of my money," I said. I slid the envelope across the table to Chloe. She opened it with trembling fingers and pulled out the documents. I watched her face as she read, saw confusion, then surprise, then tears. "I've set up 2 529 education funds," I explained. "One for Sophie, one for Jake. Each fund has been seeded with $50,000. Invested properly by the time they're ready for college, each account should have grown to around $90,000 to $100,000, adjusted for inflation and market growth. Enough for a 4-year state university education, without massive loans." Chloe was crying. "Why?" she asked. "After everything we did to you, why would you do this?" I met her eyes steadily. "Because I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for them. Sophie and Jake didn't ask for any of this. They didn't ask to have a father with a gambling problem or parents who made terrible choices. They didn't ask to be used as pawns in emotional blackmail. They deserve a chance at a better future. They deserve to go to college without drowning in debt like I did." I paused, making sure they were all listening. "But more than that, I'm doing this to break the cycle." "What cycle?" my father asked quietly. I looked at him. "The cycle of favoritism, of entitlement, of treating children as unequal. The toxic pattern that has defined our family for generations ends with my generation. Sophie and Jake will each have an equal opportunity for education. What they do with it is up to them. They'll have to work for their own success, earn their own way. They won't have one child getting everything while the other gets nothing. They'll learn that the world doesn't owe them anything and that real self-worth comes from what you achieve, not what's given to you. And maybe, just maybe, they'll grow up to be stronger, more independent, more resilient people because of it. I stood up preparing to leave. My father looked up at me, his eyes red. "Will we ever see you again?" he asked, his voice cracking. I thought about it for a long moment. Maybe someday, but not now, not soon. I need to focus on building my own life, surrounding myself with people who respect me and value me and treat me as an equal. You're welcome to work on yourselves to become better people, to go to therapy and deal with your issues. But whether I'm part of that process isn't something I can commit to right now. I need to protect my peace. My mother reached out like she wanted to touch my hand but stopped herself. "Can we at least know that you're okay, that you're happy?" I softened slightly. "I'm doing well, Mom. I have a good job, good friends, a nice apartment. I'm investing wisely and building a secure future. I'm seeing a therapist who's helping me work through everything. I'm okay. Better than okay, actually." I picked up my purse. "Take care of yourselves, and take care of Sophie and Jake. They need you to be better grandparents than you were parents." I left the coffee shop and walked out into the bright afternoon sun. It was June, and Seattle was at its most beautiful. The sky was clear and blue. The temperature perfect, the streets full of people enjoying the weather. My phone buzzed. It was Jenna. "How did it go?" I smiled and typed back, "I'll tell you over dinner, my treat. Let's celebrate." I felt lighter than I had in over a year. I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't feel guilty or conflicted. I felt free. For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying the weight of my family's expectations or their dysfunction. I had set a boundary, protected my peace, and secured not just my future, but the future of the next generation in a way that promoted real values: work, education, independence, equality. I had broken a cycle that had damaged me, and in doing so, I had given Sophie and Jake something I never had: a fair chance. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose yourself. Is it selfish to protect your peace, to set boundaries with family members who only see you as an ATM? I chose to invest in the next generation instead of enabling destructive behavior. What would you have done in my situation? Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories about standing up for yourself and breaking free from toxic relationships. Remember, you're not responsible for fixing everyone else's problems, especially when they refuse to fix themselves.